Okay. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam shakol niyeh b'dvarei.
Right.
I'll tell you the truth. I was feeling so poor last night. Again. And I was finger hovering over the button to cancel shir. And I just said, we're going to push through it. I'm not feeling great. I don't know what's going on with me, but I'm sick again, apparently. But I'm here. So I just felt like we have to try our best to move forward. The plan today, Be'ezus Hashem, is to do is to do Mem and Mem Aleph, to try our best. And then tomorrow, Be'ezus Hashem, we should all be feeling well and present. We're going to be taking, it may take one shir, may take two shir, to do a review, a chazara with the stream of consciousness document. But unlike last time where we literally went through every single part of it, took a very long time, we're just going to isolate the overview and the cumulative drip, right, where each lesson sort of flows into the next. I think it's really important to maintain, that bigger picture vision, and I don't think Chevra are likely to do that review on their own. So we're gonna do that together. Rabbi Yehudah has graciously volunteered to put the book list together and to make sure that the Chevra have it printed out, which is beautiful. Another technical announcement, and again, this is we have Baruch Hashem another 6 months here. Barring the imminent arrival of Mashiach, which we hope will come way before then, but Alpi Derech, the way that things have been going, we're still here for a while. This is not like an imminent announcement regarding our move to Eretz Yisrael. We're going to have a discussion with the Chevra. There are usually more Chevra here, so we're going to have to talk together about how we want to structure it. Obviously, the shir will continue. That's not a question. Be'ezus Hashem. And obviously, this Chevra has precedence, right? Because this is the you are the guys, right? Whether I'm here in person, whether I'm away, this is the Chevra, and it will always stay that way. So the question is whether the Chevra want to wake up early, and I'll do it at 8, and we'll keep the same time. If you want to keep that schedule, we'll have to figure out a way, but it will be around your priorities and not, whatever goes on there. Although I do imagine that there will be just as many people in RBS who are probably following this year already, if not many more, who will be there locally, because there are already many people are listening to the shir there. So we'll have to figure that out. But I'm committed, to continuing with us and continue growing together. And this is not the end, And then hopefully you'll come and join, whether in a decade or less than a decade, or as soon as people can. That was always the dream. I always told people, we were leaving Eretz Yisrael, I'm just going there to bring them home. So hopefully that will ring true in some sense. All right. Okay, today's shir is sponsored by Yaakov Klein. Nishmas, his parents, Rivka, Brent Street, Simcha, and Ya'akov ben Yeshayahu, also dedicated as a zechus for refuah sheleimah for Chaim Yehoshua and Chaim Miriam and Gadol Moshe ben Malka, also dedicated to nishmas Chaim Avrohom ben Yehudah Leib. We should only hear Besuras Toivus in the zechus of our learning together. Be'ezus Hashem. All right, so we take a look at Torah Mem, very short Torah, very interesting teaching, and just a little bit by way of introduction. Yesterday we were speaking about hiding. Yesterday in Torah Lametes we were speaking about a person who, instead of confronting relationship challenges, is running into self-indulging physical gratification. We were talking about food. We were talking in the second pirish about immorality, right? The very physical experience of that Indian of Pagama Bris, in some sense, and it was all about escape. And I think that Torah Mem really continues that theme. Torah Mem continues the theme about escaping, about running away. So the Rebbe says like this: Lashon Rabbeinu Zechron Lebracha, Isa ba'asar mamars. Interesting, he quotes the Ramah Mipano, which is quite unique. The Rebbe doesn't usually quote, later Sfarim, but he quotes the Ramah Mipano in the Sefer Asar Mamars, who teaches Eila Masa B'nei Yisrael. The words, these are the travels of the Bnei Yisrael in Parshas Masai, is B'shvil Shachata Be'eila Lehecha Yisrael. Shouldn't be Lekecha. Okay. Eila Lekecha Yisrael, I guess if it was being made in reference to the actual Hashem. With regard to Chet HaEgel, when Aaron told the people, these are your God. So the Rama Mipano draws a connection between Eila and Eila, and it appears also to be a medrash, but the Rebbe quotes it from the Rama Mipano, where there's a connection between these two words, and the reason why Klal Yisrael needed to travel in the Midbar, Yisrael, is because of Eila Elecha Yisrael. Okay, Eila and Eila. This was a consequence for that. Nimsa, says the Rebbe. It emerges that Kol HaNesiyah Shel Adam Ubishvil Kilkul Emunah. All this that a person needs to travel, and Pipshad is speaking about for Parnasa, right? This that a person needs to travel is an aspect of Kilkul Emunah. Which in a certain sense, again, in its extreme form, especially by tzaddikim, like we learned from the Baal Shem Tov, Sartem is already va'avadtem li'macherim, right? Just turning away for a minute is already serving, idols, right? Why? If a person would believe with absolute emunah that Hashem can give me whatever I need here, person will never travel. Okay, this gets into a huge conversation about hishtadlus, how a person really knows, but in the ultimate level, and again, it's a multifactorial sugya with regard to a person's emunah, not only as it relates to business, but as it relates to all different aspects of a person's life. And if a person is a mamin legamre, mamish, but it has to be for real. It can't be laziness, it can't be shirking responsibility. If a person is an absolute mamin, so then all the Sfarim Mikdashim tell us, right? Everything will be, right? I mean, we just learned in Asat Esav Sadchal Levantecha, you open up a channel, you don't need to go anywhere, you don't need to go anything. Melachta nasas l'idei achirim, right? Like the Gemara tells us, the Mishnah tells us. That's a very high level. That's what the Rebbe is speaking about over here. Al pi pshat. However, for most of us, we're not on that madrega, and we do need to travel. We do, but again, not that we need to, I want to clarify. We be'emes need to travel, because our emunah isn't such that not traveling would enable us to get what we need. Because that will only work if our emunah is 100%. If a person's emunah is 100%, then they'll get their parnasa where they are. They don't need to do, it's a very minimal ishtadlus. However, because most of our emunah is not on that level, then Gitaka do need to travel for ishtadlus. Now, in as much as a person needs to travel, says the Rebbe, we're gonna see this in a minute. Nimsa, let's just finish this part. Traveling is an aspect of a blemish of emunah, which is an aspect of idol worship. Says Shekaz of Avodas Halilim. That's why it says, with regard to Avodas Halilim, say Taimar, like go out and speak to them. Say Zabachinas Nesiya V'Tiltul. In the context of Avodas Halilim, with regard to Elam Maseh B'nei Yisrael, if a person needs to travel, there's already a pagam there. Nesiya V'Tiltul. Say, right? It's an aspect of going out. Okay, but the Rebbe says, but you have to know again that if a person is really not on that madriga, so then it's not enough for them to sit where they are and say Hashem will be mazmai pronos, because He won't, right? In other words, it has to be absolutely authentic. If it's not really authentic, and the person is just shirking his responsibility and not doing proper ishtadlus, it's not going to happen, right? Like the Medrash Tehillim says, some formulation of God helps those who help themselves, right? You have to go and you have to do what you need to do. So says the Rebbe, Gam al yedei tiltul. So now that the person needs to travel, mesakin es al tiltul shagarim k'viyachol l'mala. This traveling, and the pains and the frustrations and the tircha of the travel helps to fix up the tiltul that his actions caused lamala. Kamaisha Kaso, as the pasuk says in Yeshayahu, referring to the breaking of the Beis HaMikdash, va'amasechat sara kihiskanes, the sheep was too short to cover you, right? Like a bed that's too short, a sheet that's too short. It means the Shechinah was no longer able to dwell in the place of the Kodesh HaKadoshim, and the Shechinah departed. That's called tiltul, right? The Shechinah goes on a journey. The Shechinah escapes. Shechinah goes away. So on account of the person's lack of emunah propelling them into tiltul, okay, that itself fixes up their lack of emunah. Because they caused the Shechinah to be metaltal, because it wasn't manifesting in their life on the level of emunah sheleimah. Memela, they have to go and travel, and the tircha of the travel fixes up, right, this that they lack emunah.
How do you know he's talking about making money and not just traveling?
Because he says mazmin parnasosai, right? I mean, he said he says lahazmali kol sarkai. So, yeah, I mean, it seems in context that he's speaking about, right, you're going out to get your needs, right, which is parnasa. If a person would stay where they currently are, if they had emunah sheleimah, they would have kol sarkai. They would have whatever they need where they are without needing to go away. But I'm going to use the opportunity, because the Rebbe didn't say the word parnasa specifically to say let's interpret it a little bit more broadly, and that's why I want to interpret it in the context of lamites. Our word isn't just that a person's going far away to get their parnasa, like a person's going to travel to do business in some other country or something else. I want to say mamash like we said yesterday. Difficult relationship challenges a person's work with regard to their self-image and their self-confidence and their sense of self and their identity and figuring out what their life is all about. That yesterday we learned people can't handle that and they want to run away, they want to escape. So that's why these two Torahs are right next to each other, perhaps. Can suggest that Torah Mem is also speaking about that escape. In other words, a person doesn't think that they can get what they need where they are. Meaning to stay here in the discomfort, in the challenging conversations, in the challenging dynamics, and to work this thing through. And a person says, I need to run away, to somewhere else to be able to free myself from this unpleasantness. Ki ilu, the unpleasantness that a person's experiencing, isn't literally min hashamayim, that's where you're supposed to be. People like this, right? Constantly, just running away from relationships people go through, different relationships one after the other, because anytime anything gets a little bit unpleasant, they can't handle it, right? From the perspective of emunah sheleimah, we take a fundamentally different approach. On the contrary, when things are unpleasant, going back to Torah Lamed Vav, that's a labor process that's about to give birth to new Torah, right? To hidden secrets of Torah, to a more evolved experience of self. On the contrary, don't run away, stay there. You work this thing through. So, al pi pnimius, it's possible to suggest that what the Rebbe is saying over here is that this that we run away, this that we journey, is because we don't really believe that HaKadosh Baruch Hu orchestrated this exact situation for me to be in now. I like to use the word lichatchila, right? Not b'di'evet. There's nothing secondary or non-ideal about this. This is misheshis and mebereshis. It could not have been otherwise. So why is Hashem? Hashem is a Rachman. Hashem is endlessly compassionate. Why is He putting me through this difficult situation? I don't know, but I can't budge. I have to do the work here. There's work here. I'm in this situation for a reason, right? And again, I put myself in this situation. I made mistakes. Okay, stop being such a egomaniac, So it's me. I did it. You didn't do anything. Hashem is running the world. Hashem is running the world. Yeah, even through our bechir. If this is where you are right now, there's work to do. Says the Rebbe, a person who has emunah sheleimah doesn't need to travel. But again, I don't think he means like a physical travel, although he probably means that too. But al pi pnimius, what you're just pointing out, I think, is that there's a deeper interpretation. Traveling means just escaping. You can stay where you are. And Hashem is going to be mazmin like kol sarkai, meaning whatever the person actually needs. And you wouldn't run away, for anything in the world, or run toward anything that looks like it'll be a reprieve from the more ideal situation that you're currently in as less ideal as it appears, or unideal. Is unideal a word? Lack of, no? Don't know. Okay. So then the Rebbe says, however, a person is constantly running away, that life is a painful life. That life is an unstable life. It's not a rooted life. There's a lot of pain involved in the experience of constantly looking for something to keep you afloat, when the only reason that you're constantly feeling like you're drowning is because you don't have that consciousness, rootedness, willing to stay in the hard work. It ends up being more difficult. It ends up being more painful. Says the Rebbe, okay, the pain of the experience will itself be mitaken, because that eventually, somewhere down the line, gives a person the realization, this is probably not how I'm supposed to be living my life. And then when all the sweets, turn bitter, when all of the holiday destinations are just one frustration after another frustration, and you're running away to Florida for yeshiva week and it's 32 degrees Celsius and everybody's freezing over there, that's what's going on now. Gesundheit. So you start to realize, all right, have to do something else. Okay, second half of the little teaching. Avodas halilim causes the rain to be withheld. And over here he's continuing with the theme in Lamates of Anasati Esa B'Sat Kalev. It's part of Hayim Shemaya. Well, yeah, matar. Avodas halilim withholds matar. K'she'em matar in soiva. When there's no matar, then there's no soiva, there's no sustenance. Uk'she'en soiva ein shalom. And when there's no sustenance, there's no peace. Kamashikasav yisu harim shalom la'am. The mountains are carrying peace for the people. Kamashipir's Rashi, and Rashi explains over there that the mountains are full of produce. There was rain, there's abundance. Memela, Rashi says a very beautiful lashon. Everybody sits next to their silo that's overflowing with grain, and they're calling out to their friends. It's like a good energy. Everybody's got its abundance. But if there's no matar, then it's a rat race. Everybody that has what they have takes away from somebody else. There's no shalom. Nobody helps each other. This is another reason that a person is going to need to run away and travel and account to their parnasa. So again, you could interpret this as inner peace. And the different parts of ourselves, different chalakim of the neshama, nefesh, ruach, neshama, all the different parts. Sometimes I make reference to IFS, internal family systems, as a therapeutic modality that's extremely, extremely powerful. And identifying, different parts of myself. When there's no matar, right? When there's no matar is shefa, right? Shefa is Rosh Hashanah, the Zar Kodesh. So shefa, apropos to Tu B'Shvat, is shirish, anafim, and peiros. Rosh Hashanah is shefa. Shirish, anafim, and peiros. And that's what shefa is. So this world is the olam hafach risi. We see trees rooted below and stretching above, but be'emes in Kabbalah, like the Baal Tanya explains and others, it's flipped, right? The tree is upside down. Be'emes, klape shmaya, right? Spiritually speaking, when the tree is a metaphor, right? Lahepech, the shrashim are lamala, the anafim extend downward, and the peiros, right, is this world that we experience, right? The full potency of the potential of the seed that's revealed in the fruits. Matar is shefa, geshem, gashmius, right? It's the symbol for divine influx, right, of blessing. When that is cut off, right, and a person doesn't feel rained upon, so to speak, where they are, right, and a person's a tree, a person just doesn't feel like we're getting any matar where we are. So the tree just wants to move on over, wants to travel to somewhere else. When there's no matar, there's no sense of soiva, there's no sense of satisfaction. When there's no sense of satisfaction, there's no shalom within oneself. There's no shalom within oneself, so the different parts of me are not communicating, and I need to run away. Gamma Golos, and the Rebbe concludes this teaching. Gamma Golos Baal Bittul Torah. Golos also comes on account of Bittul Torah, Kamashikasav Gola Ami Mibli Das. Golos was a result of the nation's loss of das, of spiritual consciousness and awareness. Through Avodas Halilim, the rain, like we learned, is withheld. When there's no rain, then there's no kamach, there's no grain. When there's no kamach, there's no Torah. So bittul Torah, which is a result of that series kishamim, which is a result of Avodas Halilim, causes galus. Alkin gala ami mibli das. This is the Rebbe's short little Torah about escaping, about running away. fortifying the message that really where we ought to be is where we are. And being able to stay is a really important thing. Not to try always to extricate ourselves from difficult dynamics. Person who has the lenses of Pneumius actually goes and searches those things out. Realizes that those moments are the real moments. Yeah, if I want to skim over the surface of life and live on a shallow level, and I never want to feel any pain, then I'll never have any gain. All right, it's like a person who goes to the gym and all he ever wants, he just picks up the 1 kilo. Beautiful, but you're not gonna meet your goals unless you go and you do the work. There are these YouTubers, I can't remember their name now, and they have their slogan, I think, is "Seek discomfort." That's what it says in all their merch, right?
Yes.
Yes theory. Seek discomfort. It's a good slogan. Seek discomfort. We live in a culture where everybody's trying to do the opposite and everybody's miserable. There's never been a more uncomfortable generation than this dar that's seeking nothing but comfort. We're miserable. Why? Because the human being wasn't created to do that. The human being is a mighty warrior. It's supposed to do the work. It's supposed to recognize its strength, not shy away from the challenges, rise up in healthy shame, going back to Torah Mem Aleph, and doing what needs to be done. So important, so important. And it's almost like even before we get into uncomfortable situations, we anticipate them and we avoid them. It's not even once you're in it. It's just we try. There's no growth there. No growth. Growth goes back Lamed-ches, authenticity, right? Keser of Malchus that rises into the Yadayim of Zer Anpin, right? The Keser of Malchus, the pinnacle of deep, where now we're talking, right? What's really going on? Looking under the surface, having those difficult conversations, really ultimately with ourselves, but also with others, working things through. Being able to admit that we were wrong, like that kind of thing. It's not pleasant, but it's so pleasant. It's so pleasant. Because on the surface, it doesn't look so nice. But there's nothing more beautiful than being able to drop the mask and the facade and the protection and the armor. Armor is very heavy to carry around. It's extremely heavy. Armor is very uncomfortable. What a relief when a person can shed the armor. Right? What a relief. And being able to be transparent, open up, you made a mistake. Say it. Can admit that, can talk that through, can face it, can own it, and then you come out more of a tzelem Elokim. You come out with more emunah. You come out with more strength. Okay, that's Torah Mem. Let's take a look at Torah Mem Aleph. We'll try our best to get through this. It's extremely, extremely Kabbalistic, perhaps one of the most. So we're going to do our best with it. And let's try to get through this before the end of this year. Lashon Rabbeinu Zechron Lebracha says the Heilige Rebbe Rikudin dancing. Yini Isbeis Eitz Chaim Daf Chav Beis Amud Beis. It's brought in the Eitz Chaim Chav Beis Amud Beis that Abir Kayim Hanu Araglin Im Netzach V'Hoed Vein Ukvin. The thighs, the legs, correlate to the spheres of Netzach and Hoid, right? We know that all the different limbs of the body, like the Pasach Elio tells us, are associated with the different spheros, right? And so the right arm is Chesed, the left arm is Gvura, the torso is Tiferes, and the two legs, Netzach v'Hoid, train Shoikin, is the lashon of Eliyahu Hanavi and Pasach Elio and the Zar Kodesh. Vein Ukvin, and they are our heels. The whole leg, right? Going down to the heels. Now, ve'ekev is gematria shtei pa'amim elikim. The word ekev is gematria 2 times 86. And elikim, of course, is sheim dinim. Elikim, like we've been learning, is din. Sheyesh tam achiza lachitzonim ki yadua. And therefore, there's something particularly dangerous about the feet with regard to the experience of life. Something about the feet. Also, the pasuk says "Regleho yardas maves." Right, the feet have an aspect of going down into the darkness, as we're going to see. Why? Because, again, Eikev is 2 times Elikim. There's like a doubled over Bechina of Elokim. Now, Elikim, seen in the context of its true state, is what we refer to in Torah Lamed Ches as Ar Shirish HaGvuras. It's a very holy thing, very beautiful thing. And Elikim is not like harsh severity, concealment of Hashem. It's the creation of self for the purpose of self in the context of other, to bring Chava, now newly created as her own identity, into a panim relationship with Adam, like we learned so many times. But it's 2 times Elikim. There's that Elikim, but there's also the other side, right? Which is the possibility of the Alf and the Fulin, right? So that as Hishtalshalos continues, you can fall into a realm of fragmentation and multiplicity that hides the unity of Hashem. The strategy to enable the negative forces to lose their hold on the Ikvayim is to draw down into our Berkayim, into our legs, Gvuros Misharish Habina, like we just learned. The light of our Shirish HaGvura, which is in Bina, where in that place, again, it's much the theme that we've been learning the whole time, that in that place, I'm able to recognize that my own sense of self is not supposed to bring me further from Hashem now that I have my own sense of Bechira and so on. No, it's Adrabah. It's the way that I can get close to Hashem in this matzav. And when a person draws down into their legs, into the lowest parts of themselves, the most unfeeling parts, the part most distant from the brain, from the moichin, if I can draw down light from the Ar Sharish HaGvura, from Bina, then the experience of the external forces, they run away, and you take Bechayra and Bracha. Shezabachina is Birkayim. And the Birkayim become a place where the Bechayra can rest, right? Connected to the word Birkayim is Bechayra, same letters, and Bracha, and blessing. And it's possible to suggest, again, trying to read the flow of the Torahs, which I think we've done remarkably successfully until now, which is a huge pella. I don't know if anybody's ever learned Likutei Moharan this way, to trace the thread through all the lessons, with the assumption that they're all in a very specific order. Is that what did we just learn about in Torah Mem? Running away. How does one run away? With their feet. Right? And that's mamish, the intensification of one's own sense of self, where a person has such a lack of emunah that they just run further into self. That's what they're using their feet for. Over here we're saying, wait, where are your ekvayim running? Where are your feet going? You're not supposed to be the one running away. You're supposed to cause the perception of the difficult challenge that you're going through to be bayreach, to run away. How do I do that? Because I'm drawing down into myself the consciousness that, on the contrary, the moment that it appears that Hashem is there the least, in other words, the experience that seems the most b'di'evet lahebech is literally the most l'chadchila. If I'm living with emunah, I don't need to run anywhere. I will draw Kadosh Baruch Hu's presence down into where I am. I will communicate with Hashem and be misvoded. I will reach out to Him. I will embrace the matziv. And you know what will be boreach is the perception that I was in a b'di'evet situation. That's what will run away. I'm not running away from this. It'll run away from me. That's what the Rebbe uses. Bareach, because he makes reference here to Bareach, which is very similar to what we learned in Mem, and I'm telling you what we learned in Lametes, which is escape. You don't have to be the one to escape. It'll escape from you. You won't escape from it. You stay strong with emunah, recognizing that this situation that seems Hashem is hidden, no, HaKadosh Baruch Hu is just giving me an opportunity to contact Him, to reach out to Him. He's giving me a hyper experience of self, so that I can take that and carry that into a face-to-face relationship with Him. Trouble, right? Like I said, the Rav Hutner, right? Prayer is not to get you out of trouble. Trouble is to get you into prayer, right? A lot of people think that prayer is just, I daven when I want to get out of trouble. The only reason you're in trouble is because the main thing is Hashem wants to bring you into tefillah. What's b'chayra bracha birkayim? So this is already the Maral tells us, right? Beis, chaf, reish is the proliferation of duality. All right, Beis is 2 in the singles category. Chaf is 2 in the tens category. Reish is 2 in the hundreds category. Right, so this cluster of words, birkayim, bechayra, biracha, all speaks about the intensification of duality. But we're learning here, it's up to us how you want to play with it. In other words, if what you have is birkayim alone, which is the bechina of the ikvayim 2 times Elokim, so then the proliferation of duality leads a person into a matzav of distance from Hashem, running away, and so on. But if their birkayim are connected to the level of bechayra, which is the first, right? Reish is chach, we're going back to Torah Aleph, right? Being able to access the makar from which everything comes, what we called in Torah Mem matar, right? So then bracha.
Pishtayim.
Then bracha, pishtayim. Exactly, beautiful. Pishtayim. The bechar gets 2. Connected to that place of the bechayra, which is the shirish from which everything emerges, in this context, the shirish of kavura, which is bina, then all there is bracha. It's not a klala, it's a bracha. Says the Rebbe, B'sharish ha-bechayr is nikra yayin. The root of bechayr is called yayin kiyadua. Yayin is associated with bina. Yayin HaMisameach. And this is an experience of drinking wine that leads to genuine joy. And when he says genuine joy, it means holy joy, right? Joy of gratitude to Hashem, shirs v'sishbachais, a joy of an intensification of kedusha and tara. So this is what it says by Yaakov Avinu. When Yaakov Avinu saw that he's rooted be'etzem in a place of berkayim, because that's what Yaakov is Ekev. Kishtei ba'amim alakim im esra osis gematria Yaakov. Come back to Yaakov Avinu. The whole Quran is about Yaakov Avinu, right? Yaakov Avinu consciousness, almost every Torah. So here we come back to Yaakov Avinu. Yaakov is the aspect of Ekev with a letter Yud. Why a letter Yud? Because Ekev's gematria 2 times Elokim, and Elokim has 5 letters. So 2 times Elokim gives you 10 letters, right? Plus Ekev, which is the gematria, and together you have the word Yaakov. So Yaakov Avinu saw he was in peril, he was in danger, he was rooted in a place of extreme sense of self. Yaakov Avinu. So then he went ahead and he performed the tikkun of reconnecting his sense of self, the birkayim, to the bechayra, to the shirish. First, Yaakov Avinu buys the bechayra from Esav, right? That's the first thing he does. In other words, the world of Asiya, Esav, going back to Torah Aleph, Malchus to Sitra Achra, an experience of this world as being an independent entity, right? Disconnected from the shirish, beruchnius, the chule, right? The nun without the ches, the moon without the sun. Yaakov Avinu buys that whole inyan away from Esav, buys the bechayra, he purchases that perspective on the world that's called Malchus to Kedusha, where we see the world as a moon that's hyper connected to the energy of the Shemesh, of the sun. And then he prepares Yayin, and he brings it to Yitzchak Avinu Vayesh. And then what does he receive? He receives the bracha. Bechar, bracha, as a result of the tikkun of the birkayim, which is Yaakov himself. Because Yaakov is Ekev with 10 letters of the 2 times Elokim, which are gematria Ekev. Nimtzad emerges that al yidei rikudim, through dancing, sheshoyse Yayin HaMisameach, that a yid drinks a little bit of wine, like Reb Nosson says in Kitzur Likutei Moharan, not too much, but a person drinks Yayin, and it's Misameach, Shem Sharish Agvur Shababina. Yayin is able to wake up that part of us. When a person drinks wine, they become less self-conscious. It's interesting. It removes inhibition. Right? It removes inhibition. A person becomes less stuck in their own self-consciousness when a person drinks yayin. But that's if it's Yayin HaMisameach. When a person drinks Yayin HaMisameach, and he dances, this gets rid of the chitzainim. This is also connected to Torah Yud, when we learned about Amchas Kaf, very kudim, right? Nasa Amtakas Adinim, right? The Rebbe said that sweetens the judgments. And what were the judgments? It was arrogance, right? A person's the bechin of ana emloich. I can do everything myself. And when a person connects to the tzaddik is the bechin of Mordechai and Esther, Yadayim Raglayim, like we learned over there. And the tzaddik is the bechin of ruach. It's the ruach of anivos. It's a whole different world. Brings a person back into the realization, I'm just a part of a bigger whole. And the reason that I have the part that I have, the reason that I have my sense of self, is to be able then to bring it into contact with the whole. That's called Yayin HaMisameach. And this kind of dancing is called a fire that is pleasing to Hashem. It's a slavos that's mamish like a carbon. Carbon, huh? We're learning so much about Bahamias, Lamed Zayin, right? The Behema, Lamed Ches, the Behema Timeya. Being able to shecht that, bring it into the Beis HaMikdash, Yerushalayim energy, like we were learning. So of course the Rebbe over here makes reference to Bahamias again. It's all one thing. Aval, but Yayin could go both ways, because Bina is a precarious layer of reality, where on the one hand, it's what lifts self into other, Chachma and Bina together, but on the other hand, it's Minadin and Misarin. It's the place where my sense of self could bring me further away from Hashem. Says the Rebbe, Aval's Misha Merakibis Lavas Hayetzer. But sometimes there's a drinking of wine that, on the contrary, could bring a person even further into their Yetzer. Zenikar Chet Shal Nadav Avihu. This is called the deviation of Nadav and Avihu. Shekasabehem ve'akrivu eish zara, and it says in the Zohar Kodesh that they came into the Mishkan Shsuya Yayin. They were drunk. That's called they brought an eish zara. V'nadav Avihu him netzach v'hoid. Says in Shara Gugulim that Nadav and Avihu are themselves netzach and hoid. V'eslavish b'gedusha nikar Yayin HaMisameach. But a holy eslavus is called Yayin HaMisameach. That through this, it connects a person to the level of Bechar, which causes their Berkayim to experience bracha. But Nadav and Avihu are not drinking Yayin HaMisameach, they're drinking Yayin HaMeshakeir. That's called the Slavas HaYetzer. And there's no tzavsa. Right? It doesn't bring into connection with Hashem. On the contrary, it brings into lowly, usually immoral, right, relationships with others, which that's not what we want. Okay, so a person has to know it's dangerous. Right? It's 2 times Elokim. It can go either way. Okay? That's the inyan of Yayin. Pidyon Nefesh. This same tikkun of Yayin HaMisameach could be accomplished through what's called Pidyon Nefesh. Pidyon Nefesh, right, was a minig by Chasidim and Mikubalim, that a person goes and brings a certain amount of money to a tzaddik and he performs different tikkunim, and it's called a pidyon for their soul. In Breslov, this is a big Indian. Erev Rosh Hashanah, everybody's running around bringing pidyonis to the different Breslov tzaddikim, mashpiyim. Pidyon Nefesh is a big thing.
What's the jail one called?
What's that?
When someone's in jail, is that at the same time?
Pidyon Shvuya.
Sorry.
Yeah. Now this is something else. I mean, it's a kind of jail. Right. Person's stuck in their own stuff. This is Pidyon Nefesh, right? And a person redeems their soul for a certain amount of money. Okay? It's connected to the biblical concept of Erechin, right? Where a person donates a certain amount of money to, Pidyon Haben, yeah. There's this concept that, something could be exchanged monetarily. Okay. Says that the Rebbe, how does this work? Mamayin money is called an amud, a pillar. The Gemara in Psachim, commenting on the pasuk that referring to the wealth that Klal Yisrael brought out of Mitzrayim, as Yikum asher baragleim zeh mamayin shaladim shemamidin esel raglav. Right, so the Gemara in Psachim says this is a person's money that makes sort of stands them up on their feet, gives them a platform. So you see, money is connected to pillars. Because when the tzaddik does the pidyon, he puts his hands on the money, and Right? Shalish yados. There are 3 yadayim. Very apropos to this week's parsha also. Klal Yisrael finally, you're completely getting out of Mitzrayim. Yad chazaka, yad ramah, yad gadola. These are the 3 yadayim that are referred to in the Torah, which are Yad Gadola is the bechina of Chesed, Yad Chazaka is the bechina of Gvura, Yad Ramah is Tiferes. When you put both of the yadayim together, as we will learn by Ezra Hashem in Torah Kuf Aleph. V'aynu shalosh yados. Now v'shalosh pa'amim yad is gematria mem beis. 3 times yad is gematria 42. V'shem mem beis yesh b'shiva shemos. Okay, so what's the shem mem beis? We know that generally there are 2 very long names of Hashem. One is called the shem ayin beis, the 72-letter name, and one is called the Shem Mem Beis. The Shem Ayin Beis is rooted in the Torah in 3 psukim that refer to Klal Yisrael, last week's parsha, Klal Yisrael going into the Kriyas Yam Suf. These are psukim that begin with the words Vayisai, Vayavai, Vayet. And if you take these 3 psukim, which have 42 letters in all, and you take the first letter of the first pasuk and the last letter of the second pasuk and the first letter of the first letter of the third pasuk, you put this together, you have your first triplet of the names of the Shem Ayin Beis. Then you do the same thing with the second letter, right? The second letter of the first pasuk, the second to last letter of the second pasuk, the second letter of the third pasuk. You have your third, okay? And it's just a bunch of different triplets of letters, and this Shem can be found in more Kabbalistic Sidurim in Kriya Shema, where they put all these Shemas on the words of V'ahavta and Vayim Shemaya. And then there's and that shame is associated with chesed because it has to do with the tearing apart of reality. Chesed means it's the breach of nature, and that's what Kriyas Yam Suf was. That's why the B'ditcha B'Rav says that if anybody was looking at the Sefer Torah, right, which you probably saw on Shabbos, or at least when they did Hag Baglila, you can see that the Shir Sayam is called a Riach al Gab Levena. Right, it's not written straight like a regular paragraph. There are gaps, and the B'ditcha B'Rav says because by Kriyas Yam Suf, Hashem was tearing out the code of reality, right, to enable like the code that was that strip of water just disappeared, like, and that's like the whole reality opens up, and that's like the visual representation of the way it looks in the actual Torah scroll. Is it's not straight text, code is missing. Very fascinating. So this is the aspect of the Shem Ayin Beis. The Shem Mem Beis is the first 42 letters in the Torah. I mean, that's the root of it. That's different letters, but that's the root of it. And it's Rosh Tevis Maaseh Bereshis, and this is the Shem of Gevura. Ayin Beis is Chesed. I should say this. Ayin Beis is Chesed, and Mem Beis is Gevura. One is the creation of nature and the intensification of the way that things are, and one is the shattering of nature, and that's that. So the Mem Beis, Shem Mem Beis is connected to Gevura. Okay. Now the Shem Mem Beis is also the Shem of Anabakayach. Right. So all those different letters that you see, right, with the 7 letters at the end. 6 letters, right? The 6 letters that are the Rosh Tevis for those words, right? That in Sidurim are printed like those letters on the side times 7, right? So that's the 42-letter name. Rabbi Nechunim ben Akana wrote Anabakayach as a tefillah that incorporates this shame. And that's what the Rebbe makes reference to here. There are 7 stanzas of Anabakach. There are 7 groupings of these 42 letters. Each of the names has 6 letters. So a person has to be mechavin that they're drawing down the vav. These 7 names, each of which has 6 letters. And the tzaddik has in mind that he's drawing down, because again, how do you get the Shem Mem Beis? Because 3 times Yad. He puts his Yadayim on them. 3 times Yad is 42. The 42-letter name has 7 stanzas of 6 letters. The tzaddik's job in his kavana is to draw down the 6 down into the money, which is called the Amud. And that causes them to the money to be considered Vavei Ha'amudim. These are the hooks of the pillars in the Mishkan, but Vavei Ha'amudim means you drew down the 6 letters of the 7 stanzas of the Shem Mem Beis, Gematria 3 times Yad, into the money. And again, these pillars are also, they're legs. Legs are pillars, right? They're also connected to that place of Ekvayim, right? Ekev, Din, Kishtei Pa'am, Melikim Gematria Ekev, like we learned 2 times the Likim's Gematria Ekev. And in money, there's Achiza to the Chitzainim. there's a foothold, literally, right? For chitzainim. Ve'ein dinim takala b'shar. So how do you sweeten the din? Again, at its root, b'shar shadinim b'bina. Again, same idea, right? The root of din is in bina, because of bina din and misarimine. Bina is the place from which din is awakened. Ani bina li gvura. The pasuk says that Mishlei bina is associated with gvura. V'shem membeis is babina, and the shame of membeis is gvura, is bina, is teva, is nature, elikim, all of it. Nimsa, it emerges. When you draw down the shame membeis into right through the 3 times yadayim into the amudim of the money, as ayadinim nimtakim b'sharsham, this draws right membeis is bina, same tikkun of Yayin HaMisameach, where you're drawing down that spiritual energy of the source, the bechina b'chayra, down into the berkayim, and that produces bracha. And this is what the tzaddik is meditating on as he's going through the process, right? This Kabbalistic process of doing Pidyon Nefesh. V'zeh pirish, vavi ha'amudim v'chashukeim kasef. Vavi ha'amudim, the hooks of the pillars, and their silver bands. V'chashukeim kasef pirish. Hayde chashika v'eschabros. When the tzaddik makes a yichud, a chashika, the eschabros, and a bonding of vave im ha'amudim, when a person goes ahead and brings the vav of the 6 letters of the stanzas of the Shem Membeis 3 times yad down into the amudim, which is the bechina of the mammon, nasa kesef. This is the chashukayim kesef. This produces kesef. What's kesef? Kesef is chesed. In other words, shenim takam. This sweetens all the judgments. Okay, this is a little bit of the under the hood of what's going on when a tzaddik is doing Pidyon Nefesh. Let's finish up quickly. Eitz Chaim, Berekid Gimel. It's brought in the Sefer Eitz Chaim from the Arizal. Parakid Gimel, Shem Membeis is Babina. Shem Membeis is rooted in Bina. The Elu HaMembeis Hem Shana Hayrin HaMeirin. And these 42 letters, these 42 letters of the Shem of the Shem of Hashem produce the 370 Nahayrin HaMeirin, 370 lights. And if you take 370 and you add 8, this is Gematria HaMavarchas HaMyisrael Bas Shalom. Bas Shalom is going to be 370 plus the ches chivarta, plus the 8 of the essentially 2 times yud ke vav ke, without getting to the depth of that, but it's 2 times yud ke vav ke, and that gives you 8, just like 2 times Elikim gave you the yud of Yaakov, yud ekev, 2 times yud ke vav ke, chesed gives you 8. So when you add that into shin ayin, which comes from membeis, that gives you bas shalom. And sham b'perek Gedala gematria chashmal, we learn that this is the same gematria as Chashmal, and Chashmal is the same gematria as Malbush. This we learned already in a previous Torah. Shazah Chashmal Shoymer begadam al Yayin HaMe'ash Shal Klipa. Just like there's Shan Hayrin, if you flip the letters around, that produces Ash. What's an Ash? Is a moth. What does a moth want to do? He wants to eat the garment away. In other words, it's the chitzainim that attack the garment. What's the garment? Kasnas arvi al bishem, right? This is that I have my own sense of self. There's ash that can produce the chitzainim that are yoinik, right? That are drawing their energy from the fact that each of us live in this world with our own sense of identity. So what do we need in order to be misakin it? We need chashmal, which is malbush, right? We need to connect to a holy covering. If not, then ash, the moth, is going to eat away at that beged. Right, I need to turn my kasnas ar, which is the skin of flesh, which we learned about arla, right? That nikuda. I need to turn it into kasnas ar with an aleph. And therefore, it says that a person who wants to pour wine on top of the mizbeach, the mizbeach is just destroyed. We don't have the ability to do that. What should he do? Serve wine to Talmidei Chachamim. How does that go? Because the word nisach can mean to pour, but it could also connote malchus and memshala nasachti malki. I anointed the king, right? Nasachti nisach, right? The oil, right? It means to anoint. Yayin zebechinas bina shar shabachayir yayin HaMisameach, like we learned, right? Lenasech yayin. If you want to elevate malchus to bina, nasech is malchus, yayin is bina. Mizbeach, as we're going to see in a minute, is zebechinas dinim. Right, so you have the whole tikkun over here. Talmidei Chachamim, there's netzach v'haid. They're called limudei Hashem because Tiferes is what they're supporting, and that's what they're drawing on. Tiferes is Torah, and netzach v'haid is Talmidei Chachamim. When a person wants to draw malchus up or draw bina, the source of the din, down into malchus, shehu Yayin HaMisameach, and to should have Yayin HaMisameach. That's the tikkun. Ma'yasa, what should he do? Eitz ha'toiv al zeh, The good eitzah is Yamali Groinam al Yidei Rikudim al Yidei Pidyon. Do one of these two tikkunim. Either Rikudim through Yayin HaMisameach, because Talmidei Chacham is Netzach V'Hoid, meaning you want to be Mesakin them, or Pidyon Nefesh. Kamay Shemuvah Le'el Gam, and here he finishes, Gam al Yidei Mili Groinam Nimta Kadinim. Also by actually feeding Talmidei Chacham the wine, this will sweeten judgments. If it appears Talmidei Chachamim marbim shaleim ba'olam. The tzaddikim Talmidei Chachamim are marbim shaleim ba'olam, because what's shaleim? Like we learned, Hamavarich Asami Yisrael. Bas shalem is gematria chashmal, malbush, and the sha nahirin together with the ches chivarta. Right? Shal yadam nimshach shem shal membei shem sha nahirin ches chivarta gematria bas shalem. And that's what the Talmidei Chacham and Netzach V'Hoid are able to do in this world. The Talmidei Chacham nikra Netzach V'Hoid raglin k'may shemuva b'medrash, like it says in the medrash. The Talmidei Chacham are called Netzach V'Hoid. Shoikav amudei sheish. This is a reference to Talmidei Chachamim, and it's very precise, right? Shoikav Netzach V'Hoid amudei sheish. Right, so amudei sheish is itself the tikkun of the pidyon. Right, sheish is the 6 letters of the 7 stanzas of Anabakaya, the 6 groupings of the Shem and Beis. Amudav is the money, right? That we said that's mamidin, like an amud, adam al raglav. So that's literally the pasuk. Shoikav amudei sheish, and what's that a reference to? Netzach V'Hoid, Talmidei Chachamim. V'gam mizbeach nikra raglin. The mizbeach is also called regel, which is din. Kamay shekasav zivchu zivchei tzedek. Your karbanos shall be karbanos of tzedek. Kamay shekasav tzedek l'fanav yahalich, and tzedek shall travel before you. That's the bechina of walking. And so you see the mizbeach is connected to Netzach V'Hoid. The mizbeach is connected to din. Hashem shall give you the desires of your heart. The emasai when? What's atzascha? What do you mean? What are you filling? This is a reference to filling the gara in the throat of the Talmidei Chachamim, either literally or Netzach V'Hoid through the tikkun of rikudim with Yayin HaMisameach or Pidyon. That's called v'chalatzascha yemale. Why? Talmidei Chachamim nikram eitzas. Talmidei Chachamim is called eitzas. Kamasha amru v'nehenem imenu eitzav v'sushia. A person who learns Torah Lishma will be able to give good advice. Eitzav v'sushia. V'kamasha kaso atzas Hashem lo'olam tamoid. Right, and that's a reference to the tzaddikim she'im amudei olam, right, who are the pillars of the world. Memela v'chol atzascha yemale is a mirror in a pasuk of that Ma'amar Chazal. If I feel the groinam of the Talmidei Chachamim, either literally, right, or Netzach V'Hoid through these 2 tikkunim, because the Talmidei Chacham are called eitzah, then yitin l'cha kil v'vecha. What's yitin l'cha kil v'vecha? Leib is bina. Right, yitin l'cha kil v'vecha. Then a person will be able to access the R shirish agvuras. Kumasha kazu Hashem tzvakos ya'atz. Right, tzvakos is right. Hashem tzvakos in Netzach V'Hoid. Tzvakos is the name that's associated with Netzach and Hoid. Hashem tzvakos and Elikim tzvakos, and you have this word ya'atz eitzah in correlation to tzvakos. And over here you have that whole tikkun. So again, we're seeing. We went through it way too quickly, but okay, be that as it may. We have. You'll go back and review it. I'll go back and review it. But we see that there's this theme that's running through the whole entire Inyan. We're trying to be mamtik, our sense of self, with the Ar Shirish HaGvura. That's the key point. The point is, yes, I have a sense of self. Yes, I go through difficult moments. But all of it is to bring Hashem back into my life in an even deeper way. Chava split off from Adam so that she should turn around and meet Adam face to face. My sense of self can lead to a degradation, right? And a distancing from Hashem, because hey, here I am, Chava's created and she frolics off into the garden, right? That's called Yayin HaMeshakeir, right? That's the opposite. But there are tikkunim, and the tikkun is to keep on going back to the source. Whether it's Pidyon Nefesh, whether it's drinking Yayin HaMisameach with good Yidin, Purim's coming up, Abalina L'Taiva, it should be with a good atmosphere, with holiness and Kedusha, or whether it's Pidyon Nefesh. These are 2 very practical things we could do that immediately bring us back into the context of source, in which case, not only isn't our sense of self going to bring us farther from Hashem, on the contrary, it and the experience of din, hard times, difficulties, challenges, is precisely where I'm able to find HaKadosh Baruch Hu and to meet Him panim b'panim with love and true shalom. What a privilege. Okay, Be'ez Hashem, tomorrow we're going to do the review. I'm looking forward to it. I do hope I'll feel better. And
Al kol nishmas